There's no place like home. There's no...
All right, good morning. Those are some pink shoes, aren't they? Anybody gone out and bought pink shoes since this? Okay, a couple of guys. Okay, that's good. I want to make sure that I caught how that worked. I couldn't find any of that pink for me, so that fit. But we are finishing this series called Uncluttered Love. It's actually a really good setup for Easter. To me, at least, it is, and it's one of those that. When you do a series like this, you get a lot of people coming and asking you questions or a lot of comments because it's really where we live, isn't it? And I don't think that you could probably come to a better place dealing with where we live than this final subject, which is when we talk about forgiveness. And if you saw the title, it was Forgive and what? Because that idea of forgive and forget, I mean, it's really difficult for us to deal with forgiveness. I think in our nature, just kind of who we are and our own insecurities, our own struggles, forgiveness is a difficult thing. But if you remember a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about the secret to making a marriage or making love, and I filled in the blank. It was there intentionally. Secret to making love. It will pop up on there, and then a blank, and to catch your attention. You still don't get it. Okay, that's good. Making love work, or you could put making love, grow, or making love last. I mean, all of those would certainly work in this, and this is Paul writing in the book of Ephesians. He wasn't just talking about marriage, but he was certainly included that in all relationships when he said this in chapter number 4 of Ephesians. Very last verse, he says, "And be kind to one another, tender-hearted." Here you go. And doing what? Forgiving one another. But he qualifies it, just as God in Christ, he's forgiven you. In fact, he's not only saying this is why you should forgive, he's actually saying this is what the kind of forgiveness we're talking about. Forgiving the way God has forgiven you. Listen, if you can't show kindness, then a relationship's not going to grow. It's not going to work. If you can't show tenderheartedness, that means relating to them, trying to put yourself in their position, understanding how they see it. And we talked about that last week, how we see it differently, but it is that love and that tenderheartedness that causes you to gain from their view. It's not a view that you have. You don't see it that way, but you gain from their view. But here is the real key, and that is the ability to forgive the other person. And the reason is because you will be hurt in a relationship, right? Everyone hurts. Everyone does things that hurt. Everyone receives hurts. So if you can't forgive, then what happens is they just build up. They just become like invisible piles of garbage, of trash, in your life and in your home that you're always tripping over and you're always trying to avoid, even though no one wants to acknowledge that they're really there. It's a really painful and dangerous thing to not learn how to forgive the way God forgave us. Not to let God teach us. Now, why is this such a difficult thing, especially in love relationships? I think there's a reason. Because in love relationships, you think, well, if there's any place that I should not get hurt, it should be here, right? I mean, if there's anyone who should not hurt me, it should be my wife or my husband, they're supposed to love me. And so it sort of throws us off when the truth is it's in that relationship that forgiveness should be more pronounced than in any other relationship. Because there is where you absolutely know you've got to dig down to the depths of making it work, and you can't make it work without forgiveness. So forgiveness should be more pronounced and more profound in that relationship than any other relationship. That's really the way that it should work. There's some other reasons that it makes it difficult for us, and I want to point these out by just saying what forgiveness is not. Here's some things that forgiveness is not. Forgiveness is not saying it didn't hurt. It did hurt. It is painful. It is difficult. Forgiveness is not saying that it doesn't matter. It does matter. It is important. It's not just blowing things off. If you can blow it off, it wasn't that big a deal, and you should blow off things that you look at and say, that's really not that big a deal. But things that are a big deal, they are important. They do matter. And forgiveness is not saying that it won't happen again. It will happen again. In all relationships, it will happen again. We tend to think, but here in a love relationship, shouldn't we learn? Yeah, we should learn how to forgive, and we should learn how to move past it. But unfortunately, it will happen again. That's just the way that love relationships work. What's your natural reaction when you're hurt? I mean, some people, hide away. First reaction is ouch. What's your first reaction? Your first reaction, it seems the most natural, is to do what? Hurt back, isn't it? In fact, what happens is if you can't hurt the person that hurt you, your tendency is to go back and hurt the person that you trust the most because you're still hurt. And here is a protected relationship, a secure relationship. I can express my feelings. So what happens is a guy, goes to work. He has a bad day at work. His tendency is to come back, and because he could not deal with it there, deal with it in the home. And it's not fair, of course. Shouldn't work that way, but that's what they do. Or a wife goes and, she's hurt by one of her friends. She couldn't deal with it there, and she comes back here. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with when you come back into your marriage, especially, guys, let me tell you, with your wife dumping things. I think that there's a part of marriage that I call hold the bucket, and that's just part of it. And it's okay. And that's part of her need, and you just stand there and hold the bucket knowing some of it's going to splash on you. That's just the way it is. Sorry, but she's going to throw it all up, and it's going to get on you, and you just do that, That's part of loving somebody and understanding that this is what love is all about. But also understand that there may be some visceralness, along with this that goes in there, because our tendency is to hurt back. When Jordan was a little guy, and Jamie, when they were little, we lived in a house, Johnny and I, and it had one of those, you have the counter and then the cabinets up there, and you can see between them into the next room. And so I was in the kitchen watching them because they were getting a little agitated with each other. And so I was watching them from a distance, and at some point, Jamie, who's several years older than Jordan, she punched Jordan in the arm or leg or so. I don't know what, And of course, being a good dad, I ignored it. So, hey, they got to work things out. I'm not getting in the middle of all that. It's good for them to learn to work it out. So I watched, and all of a sudden, he got up and little hands on the hips, and he marches into the kitchen, Still got the hands on the hips as he marches in, and he comes up to me, and I thought, okay, he's going to tell me about it or something. He punched me in the leg. Because he can. That's true. Dad is probably not going to punch him back. I thought about, doing it, but, Dad is probably not going to punch him back. And I asked him, I said, why did you do that? And he said, because Jamie hit me. See, that's what we do. She hit me. I can't hit her back because I'm going to lose. In this, she's older than I am. She's bigger, and she's meaner. And, that's just the way he would look at it. And so I'm coming and punching you because I can't. It's just the way we react. It's just the way we do things, So what is forgiveness? What is forgiveness? Let me give you 3 things this morning. I can't cover everything. We've been kind of playing with it, but I think it's really important for us to kind of really take a hard look at what forgiveness is. in our lives. First of all, forgiveness is giving up the right for revenge, for vengeance, you know. I want to punch back, but forgiveness is saying, you know what, I'm do that right, but I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I love you. Because I know it won't end in a good place. If you know, just turn on the news and watch the Middle East. And if you punch and you punch back and you punch back, and they've been doing that for 1,000 years, right? Does it end in a good place? It ends in a really bad place. At some point, there has to be enough love in the relationship that says someone has to end this. I will end it. I will give up my right to punch back. I will give up my right to hurt back. Here, listen to what Jesus actually said. These are actually his words because, you know, the law, as they understood it, what they had heard, said what was natural to them. And so he sort of contrasts this when he says, you've heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your what? So if you're an Aggie, love the Aggies, hate the Longhorns. That's right. Okay, a few people were willing to say that, or vice versa. He says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. That means if you're an Aggie, love the Aggies and pray for the Longhorns, right, that they will be converted and become Aggies. No, that's the way Jesus said you're supposed to deal with this. It's the only way that you do convert your enemies, right? You know, it's the only way that you resolve conflicts in the relationship. You don't punch back. And he added this part. Did you catch this? He says that you may be, in other words, you may act out the way your Father acts out. You may do the things that he does. Now, let me ask you this one question. You think it works out good for God? Do you think God forgiving and saying, I will give up the right for vengeance, you think it works out good for him? Does, doesn't it? He gets what he wants, which are those he made that he loves, even though they have turned against him. That's how he rescues us. That's how he grabs our heart and we come back to him and say, oh my goodness, he has forgiven. It's the story of the prodigal son, right? I'll go back to the Father because at least, if I go back to the Father, even though I've squandered all the wealth he gave me, all the stuff he gave me, I'll go back because it's better there than it is to live the way I'm living. And he comes back, and what does he find? Not that his father gives him a menial job and says, but I don't ever want to see you. No, instead he finds that the Father is watching from a distance. He's watching from a distance, and he runs to his son, to his daughter, because they realize, oh my goodness. So rather than, vengeance, striking back, no, God forgives. God opens the door to bring us back in to the relationship. Second thing is this. That was the first thing. Second thing is this. Forgiveness is not only giving up my right for vengeance, it's offering up to someone else what was offered up to me. And that's a big deal because we can learn. We don't have to stay the way we are. We don't have to keep doing things the way we've always done them or what we thought seemed natural. You have the ability, and I have the ability to go beyond that, for God to teach us and for God to take us to a different place in life, to step into a different place, a more powerful place. Listen, it's not easy getting there. It's painful many times getting there, but God has the intention of making you like himself, making you into someone not the way you are, but someone the way he planned for you to be and what he created you with the potential of being. But he has to teach you and take you to that place. There's a prayer in the next chapter, in Matthew chapter 6, that we call, it's Jesus teaching his disciples how they should pray and the elements of prayer. And we call that, you know what it's called? It's called the what? The Lord's Prayer. And the Lord's Prayer, say it with me, it goes like this. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You know what that means? That means the beginning of the prayer is to say, God, I acknowledge, I understand, you're way beyond me. I'm here. You're there. And your ways, hallowed be thy name, means your ways are so much better than my ways. You know so much more than I know. You understand what I do not understand. If I just worked on my understanding, how weak and how foolish I would be. But instead, you want to teach me your ways. Our Father, you get a chance to talk to him. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Hallowed be your ways. Holy and above and power, are what you understand compared to what I understand. Then he says, thy kingdom, what? Come. Thy will be on earth as it is. In other words, what would really be great, God? If we could learn to do things the way you do them. If the way we did things here matched up with how you saw things and you understood them, wow, how much better they would be, because you've probably done the same thing that I've done. You have done what you felt like was the right thing to do, what you thought you should do, only to find out it ended up in a bad place, right? And you think, man, if there was only someone who could teach me, only someone who saw things different than I did. In fact, the ancient theologians, one of their illustrations is they would say it's like God lives up there and God sees down the road and God sees what you can't see. So you pick a path based on what you do see, what you think and what you feel is going to be the best thing for you, but God sees, and many times God says you don't want to go down that road. You don't want to do that. You don't want to punch back. I'm just telling you. I understand it's what you feel like and what you think would work out best, but I'm going to teach you a better way, and it really is a better way. Down the road, you will be happy that you listened to me and that you learned from me the way that I want to teach you. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our what? It's an acknowledgement. He's absolutely saying you need to acknowledge everything that you have, every good thing that you have comes from God. He is the supplier. You work with it, absolutely, but you don't give yourself what you need. It is God who gives you what you need, and that acknowledgement is absolutely key in the relationship. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our... Yeah, I can tell which denomination you grew up in when you did that. If you said trespasses, you were probably Baptist. If you said debts, you were probably Presbyterian or Methodist. If you said, I don't know what you're talking about, then you probably, no, I won't go there. So, But the translation I put in your outline says, and forgive us our sins, because that's what it is, our wrongdoings, as we have forgiven those who've sinned against us. Did you catch that? And it doesn't say, and then we will. It just says, as we have forgiven, those who've trespassed against us, those who are indebted to us. Whew. And then he says, and lead us not to temptation. See, I don't think when he says that he's saying, God, help me avoid chocolate cake. I don't think he said that. I'm just telling you. I think it's a lot bigger than that. I think he's saying the temptation is to do things our way. Temptation is to follow our old patterns and not to learn. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from it. Literally means deliver us from the evil one. His ways, how he would trick us, how he would, twist us and manipulate us and bait us into going after the wrong thing. That's a pretty good prayer, isn't it? And then, after the Lord's Prayer, you can read in Matthew 6, he actually says this. He says, and if you forgive other people their sins, your Father will forgive you your sins. But if you do not forgive, your Father in heaven will not forgive you. And I'm sure their response was ours. Just silence. It's pretty tough, isn't it? He's just kind of laying it out there. Now, I don't think he's laying out that our relationship with God is a conditional thing. I think when you take it all into account and you look at all the things that Jesus said, what you will realize is the reason it shocks us and the reason it catches us off guard is because he is trying to make some hard statements about where you live, how you see it, that are absolutely critical to your success, yes, your happiness, And if he doesn't say them in a way that really grabs your attention, you will miss what he's trying to say. Now, I'll take you to the third point, because I know you think, well, can we resolve this pretty quick? Okay, here we go. Third point, and that is that forgiveness is opening a door for reconciliation. Forgiveness is not reconciliation. It's just you have opened the door now for reconciliation. God offers forgiveness. It doesn't mean that everyone responds to it and is reconciled. But he does offer it. Christ gave his life. But the only ones, at least in the Bible, as I read and understand it, the only ones who benefit from it are those who respond to it. And the open door, they respond to that open door, and they are reconciled by their faith, by their belief in Christ to the Father. They're brought to the relationship that they want. But God has taken the step. He has done it. So let me take you to one more story. This, you jump all the way to Matthew 18 in Matthew's account of the gospel. And this is a story that he tells. And it starts with this, because most people remember Matthew 18 because of 18:15. And they call it the Matthew 18:15 principle of confronting someone in order to deal with a struggle. But in doing that, as Jesus did with it, Peter comes up and does what might be natural. He says, now wait a minute. I'm sorry, that's my translation. Then Peter came to him and said, Lord, well, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? And Peter obviously is thinking, hey, I'm being pretty spiritual to say 7 times, but I can count that often and I can keep up with it. But after 7, God, I'm free, right? I can say nothing to do with them. Hey, if you took that into marriage, you wouldn't be married very long, right? So up to 7 times, and here's Jesus' response. He says, I do not say up to 7 times, but I say 70 times 7. We got any math people here? 490? So Peter's got to be thinking, are you kidding me? I'm not sure I can keep a list that long. That's exactly the point. You're not supposed to. But I can't keep offering forgiveness and keep offering forgiveness and wow, the weight of that. And so then Jesus, as he often did, as he's got their attention, just like he's got our attention, he goes into a story as an illustration, and it will involve God and us. And also, here's his story, next part of that. He says, for this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king. That, as you can imagine, the king represents who? God, that's right. And who wished to settle accounts with his slaves, those that he was greater than in his story. When he began to settle them, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Now, a talent in their day was a certain weight of gold or silver. 10 talents would, in today's economy, might be worth, I don't know, tens of millions of dollars. Let's just say that. So he had invested heavily in this person, in this servant of his, and apparently didn't work out very well, right? So what he'd invested in, put his money into, decided to come up with, he had lost it. He was deeply, deeply, deeply in debt. So he's deeply, deeply, deeply in pain, and nothing's working well for him. And this is what he says to the king. He says, but since he did not have the means to repay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, along with his wife, his children, all that he had, and repayment be made. That, in their culture, that's exactly what would be done, even though, of course, it could never be paid back. And then the next verse says, so the slave fell to the ground and prostrated himself before him, saying, have patience with me, and I will repay you everything. And look, catch this. And the Lord of that slave felt compassion, and he released him and forgave him the debt. Wow. Are you kidding me? But picture of God, because for God, relationship is always more important than stuff. And God would be willing to lose stuff rather than lose relationship, those that he loved, even though we are the ones who have caused the separation. See, our tendency is to say, I will use relationship in order to get stuff. God says, I've got to teach you a different way. There's a better way. Stuff's not going to last anyway. Relationship does. You got to understand what's more important, what's more lasting, what makes the bigger impact. And in the story, that's exactly what he's pointing to. But look at what happens next in the story. He says, but the slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves, somebody that worked for him, who owed him 100 denarii. Now, a denarii was a day's wage for an average laborer in their day. So, there's a couple $1,000s, I guess. And he seized him and began to choke him. I mean, this is not just, so he's got him by the throat, right? And he's saying, pay back what you owe. And look at the response. His fellow slave fell to the ground, began to plead with him, saying, have patience with me and I will repay you. Same response he had, but he was unwilling, it says. Big contrast. The compassion that the king felt and what the king did, he was unwilling and went and threw him in prison until he should pay back what was owed. And then look at the next part. So his fellow slaves, this the rest of us, saw what had happened. They were deeply grieved, and they came and reported to their Lord all that had happened. Then summoning him, his Lord said to him, you wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not also have had mercy on your fellow slave in the same way that I had mercy on you? Now I want you to catch that. Mercy on him the same way I had mercy on you. And his Lord moved with anger now. So he's gone from compassion to being moved with anger, handed him over to the torturers until he should repay all that was owed. And then he says this, he finishes, my heavenly Father will also do the same to you if each of you does not forgive his brother from your heart. See, the first time I ever read that, I had a big problem with it. In fact, I still struggle with it. I think you probably do too, saying, wait a minute, but you forgave him. You can't take that back, right? But if you get caught there, you'll actually miss the whole point of the story and what he's trying to say. He's trying to say forgiveness is opening a door. Forgiveness means now there's an opportunity. It was an opportunity for this servant to have a relationship now once again with the king, but instead he was more intent on going out and and collecting on his debts. Instead, he misses the opportunity, and in his actions, he actually says something. In his actions, he actually tells you what's really going on in his heart. In a relationship, especially in a marriage, you can tell what's really going on by actions, by what's happening. A couple of weeks ago, Joni and I, we were coming back in her car. I had just gotten out of mine, and so I had some things with me, including I had my church keys, and I was going to need them later to come up here when no one else was up here. So as I was getting out of the car, I remember I put them in the kind of the center cup holder, and I remember she was doing something and she had moved them. So I'm pulling the garage in her car. I'm about to get out, and I look and I go, hey, what did you do with my keys? I didn't touch your keys. Typical of a husband and wife, right? No, I saw you move them when you, no, I didn't touch your keys. Yeah, yes, you did. No, it's not. You always blame me. I didn't, right? And so we get in this discussion in the car, and finally, I get out and I go in the kitchen, and as I go in the kitchen on the counter, what's sitting there? The keys. I'm like, oh my goodness, And I thought, she is really fast. Because in the moment that I said, where is it? And I looked aside, she got up, grabbed the keys, went there and put it in the counter and got back in the car. I mean, just like, Superman. Whoa, right? No, obviously, when I had come to pick her up, I'd taken the keys inside and I'd put them down. I didn't remember it that way. And so, I'm in there and, I do what, what men do. I'm in there and I have to say, hey, you can stop looking. I found where you put them. No, I found them. And so we actually went through this for a day and a half because it's still hard for me to, I like the, forgive us our debts as, what am I going to do here? And finally, and she did what you should be allowed to do, especially ladies. She came and she said, that really hurt my feelings. You made me feel like a criminal Like some devious person trying to whatever, and you're the one that moved the keys and all. And so I had to do what we all should do, especially in relationships that matter, love relationships. In fact, here are 12 words that you should learn to practice to make your love relationships work. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? And that question means she might say no. I knew she would. I love you. Because it's an acknowledging that I need your forgiveness. Because I do things that are wrong. I make mistakes. In fact, I make big mistakes. And to say even that I'm sorry doesn't mean I won't make mistakes again or even the same mistakes again. In fact, it seems as the years go by, I forget where I put things even more now, right, than I did before. But I was wrong in making it seem like she had done it and making her feel accused, even though most times she is the one that, no, okay, I'm sorry, don't want to go there, right? It's important. It's a big deal. In fact, you can have a healthier marriage, a healthier relationship with the person that you love when you do these things. You do make yourself vulnerable, but you give them the opportunity to open the door for reconciliation. And you say, it's really up to you. And they open that door. Now, let me tell you something. When you get deeply hurt, you might not open up that door right away. It may take, again, it's not saying it didn't hurt. It's not saying it wasn't important. It's not saying that it won't happen again. You realize, you recognize, but it's in opening that door that reconciliation is possible. Let me ask you one last question this morning. How do you know? How do you know that you've been forgiven? Some people would say, well, I feel forgiven, right? I feel free. True? It's a great feeling. But what Jesus is actually saying is, you can feel that way, but the real test of forgiveness, and that's what Jesus' story was all about, is whether or not you're able to what? Forgive. Because if you've been forgiven, here's the trick. Let me just tell you. You can be forgiven and still feel guilty. You can. It's okay. I still look at the things that God has forgiven me of, and when I look at those things, I realize I still messed up at that. That doesn't mean I'm not forgiven. It means I look at it and realize, wow, once again, what He did forgive me of. Forgiveness is not a feeling, but forgiveness, when all of a sudden, you accept forgiveness and you really understand that you've been forgiven and it's reconciled, all of a sudden what happens is you are able to do something that you couldn't do before. You can go out to someone else and you can offer forgiveness. You can set them free so that the relationship can be reconciled also. That's what Jesus is trying to point out. He's trying to say that the man forgiven tens of millions of dollars, he never accepted forgiveness. He never understood forgiveness. It never did anything for him. And you can tell by what he did that forgiveness really had no effect. There was no reconciliation. That's what forgiveness is trying to do. It's trying to move toward reconciliation. Have you ever participated, anybody here ever participated in a foot washing before at a church or anybody ever participated? A few people have. It's quite an experience. I mean, it really is. In a foot washing, someone comes by and you take off your shoes and socks on, they wash your feet, and then you wash the next person's feet. And Jesus, I don't know if you know this, but Jesus actually did this for his disciples. And a strange thing happens in a foot washing. You think that the real hard part is going to be washing someone else's feet. In fact, it's the same thing with forgiveness. You think the real hard part is going to be forgiving someone else, but actually the really hard part is having your feet washed. And the real hard part of forgiveness is really accepting forgiveness and that God would forgive you, because it's very, very, very humbling. It's a very deep thing to realize that God would do this for you. The disciples, when Jesus said, "I'm going to wash your feet," they said, "You're not washing our feet," because it's difficult for them. But once he washed their feet, let me tell you, he said, "Then you go do the same." It was very easy for them because they had their feet washed. It was easy for them to wash somebody else's feet. That was nothing in comparison to what it took to get there. That's the way forgiveness is. Forgiveness is deeply moving because you realize what it costs God to forgive you. It is deeply humbling to recognize and understand that God has forgiven you because He wants to know you. He wants you to be close to Him. He wants you to learn from Him. And it empowers you to love the way He loves. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you know us so well. You know what we need. You know what our first reactions usually are and how those reactions don't usually get us where we want to go. In fact, most of the time they lead us down the wrong road. And just like a father who loves his children, you teach us something different. You do something different in our lives so that we would change perspective, change understanding, so that we would be profoundly changed inside. If you're here this morning, and if you look at your actions and how you live and you realize, I've never received forgiveness. I've never truly believed that Jesus Christ gave His life to forgive me of my sins. This would be a good time. Say thank you. And say, Jesus, I know you did this because you love me. You love my relationships, the people I have a chance to interact with, and by my actions, my love, and even my forgiveness, I have a chance to point them in a different direction. Thank you for forgiving my sins, for being willing to come and know me. Fill me with your Spirit. Walk with me. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.